Hello, my name is Julian Petrus, and I'm one of the transportation engineers working on neighborhood traffic reviews. In this video, I'll provide you a brief overview of the city's parking policy and go over some of the options for parking restrictions that may be considered during a neighborhood traffic review. The traffic bylaw outlines the rules for parking in the city. Here are a few of the key regulations related to parking in residential areas. No parking within 1 meter of the entrance to a driveway or alleyway. No parking within 1 meter of a fire hydrant, no parking within 10 meters of an intersection, and no parking within an intersection, including T intersections. This means that if you have a 3-legged T intersection, parking is prohibited along the top of the T where there is no intersecting roadway. There are a few types of parking restrictions that we could consider during a neighborhood traffic review. In the past, we've implemented loading zones near places like churches and businesses. There are a number of criteria where a loading zone may be warranted, such as when the majority of goods are large items and there's a lack of off-street loading facilities. If there is no loading space within 50 meters without crossing a street, or for an apartment block that has more than 30 suites. Another type of restriction is a disabled person's parking zone for an individual household. The disabled parking zone should be within the property lines and should not be installed at locations where it would be a detriment to traffic safety or traffic flow. For an applicant to be eligible for a disabled person's parking zone, the property must not have a driveway, and the applicant must be a valid placard holder and display it in the window of their vehicle when parking in the disabled parking zone. Lastly, there are a few different types of restrictions that schools can implement, such as pickup and drop-off areas or bus loading areas. We work directly with school administrations to determine the signage needs for each school site. We also look at prohibiting parking in certain circumstances. As outlined in Council Policy C710, there are several conditions that may trigger a no parking zone. However, every location is assessed on a case-by-case basis. Some of the conditions that may trigger a no parking zone include where parked vehicles create a safety concern, where the road alignment restricts visibility, where there are high volumes of parking violations, and where the visibility of pedestrians are restricted. Here are some examples of locations within a residential neighborhood where a no parking zone may be installed. At locations with a high number of collisions that involve parked vehicles, at locations with poor sight lines, such as when a driveway enters the roadway on a curve, between two driveways that are so close together that any vehicles parked between them restrict the sight lines, at pedestrian crossings where parked vehicles reduce the visibility of pedestrians, and at locations with high volumes of parking violations that could potentially be reduced by installing signage that clarifies the no parking zone. You might see this at locations with high parking demand, such as near schools, where drivers start to park too close to the intersections before and after school. When we receive a request for a parking restriction, we will generally go through 3 steps. The first and most important step is to conduct a site visit to assess the sight lines and drive in and out of the location to get a feel for the driving experience. We try to visit the site at different times of day to assess the parking demand throughout the day and night. We then check the collision data to see if there are any trends that can be addressed using a parking restriction. And finally, we reach out to our colleagues at Parking Enforcement to see if there's a high number of violations and if they believe a parking restriction would increase compliance. We often receive requests regarding the residential parking program. However, this program is outside of the scope of the neighborhood traffic review and is led by the Parking Services Division. Generally, the residential parking program is intended to manage parking pressures when a residential neighborhood is located near a parking generator, such as a business district or institution, where the parking pressure is created by non-residents. In RPP areas, non-resident parking is limited to a short period during weekdays. Eligible residents are able to purchase permits that allow them to park for longer periods of time. In order to apply for a residential parking permit zone, the first step is a resident-led petition identifying support for the zone and interest in purchasing permits. To learn about the residential parking permit program, please visit www.saskatoon.ca/RPP program. This concludes our brief overview of the parking regulations in the City of Saskatoon. We will consider the need for parking restrictions in your neighborhood as part of the neighborhood traffic review. Thank you.